And then we've got a class Facebook group if you want to be a part of that. It's always good to see updated pictures, hear stories, find out how people are doing. Continue to pray for the Boatwrights. They closed on their house. Michael, who had surgery, and Tim Brown. Not that Michael. Michael didn't speak today. Apparently, he had bit his tongue. Yeah. And he bit it well. Yes. You know, go eat a banana next time we're fruit.
Soup.
Man.
You think with all that biting experience, you could avoid biting?
I know it. Exactly.
This morning we're going to finish up. We've been in Matthew 1 and 2 for December, and then we'll transition to Genesis. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, starting next week. But we're going to look at the protection of Jesus Christ, Matthew 2, 13 to 23. We started off the first Sunday in December going over the family of Jesus Christ. Then we did the birth of Jesus Christ, the worship of Jesus Christ, and we were off. Hopefully you had a good time during Christmas, and I'll tell you officially, Happy New Year. All the best for 2016. The same God that was faithful in 2015, I don't think he plans on changing. So we'll keep trusting him for the new year. So today we'll look at the protection of Jesus Christ. We started off Matthew 1:1. And we read the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And just as a good recap, tell me, why was that important? What did we pull from there?
That he's from born of, he's a human.
Okay.
Yeah, trace it back. Everybody knows David, Abraham.
Okay. David and Abraham were important because who is Matthew writing to? Jews. Okay, he's writing to Jewish people. David is?
King. Their king.
The great king. He's the one that would get the Davidic covenant that you will always sit on the throne, or a child from the line of David. And one would come that would rule over all forever. And then who's Abraham?
Father? Father of the
Father of faith. Good. He's Father Abraham. God's going to make to him the promise that in you, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed, and you will be Abraham, a father of many. What else did we say was important, though, about Matthew 1:1? This Jesus is the Christ. And what does the Christ mean? He's Messiah. The one that the Jews had been looking for and waiting for. Matthew declares, this is Jesus. This is who he is. We then moved on to Matthew 1:21, and we found out about the purpose of Jesus Christ. You shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Remember, all of the gospel writers, they're lifting up Jesus. If you get something other than Jesus, you've missed their purpose. Far too often we read and we're looking for what's here for me. What do I get? What's the good stuff that I need for my day today? And they're telling you, look at Jesus. And so Jesus comes, he'll save his people from their sins, but more than that, they'll call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. So Jesus brings God with us, the fact that he is in our lives. We then got to Matthew 2:2. We read, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Who said this?
The Magi.
The Magi. And what did we talk about the Magi? Who were they?
It was a group of selected, it was like the wise, everybody else say like the wise men, but there was a group of selected that was appointed to seek him.
Okay. Group that came to seek him. You remember where they came from? From the east, probably from Iraq, that area. Daniel was a wise man, so he wrote. But what's important? Why is it important that Matthew's talking about the wise men are coming? They weren't Jewish. They were Gentiles. Remember, in Jesus' genealogy, he's already laid out 4 ladies that were not Jewish within his lineage. And so the Gentiles are always involved in God's plan. And here it is. These Gentiles come and they say, where is the one that has been born king? Not born to be made king, but they recognize he's born king. Herod is troubled. All Jerusalem is troubled. What do you mean? something's wrong here. But the wise men seek him. They come to worship him. In Matthew 2:11, they go into the house, they see the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and they worship him. And we find that Gentiles are already coming from his birth and from his childhood to worship this Jesus. Matthew's setting up something, and we're going to find at the end of today, Matthew 2:13-23, he's going to set up the whole Gospel of Matthew in these first two chapters. And you'll see what's the progression that he makes. So let's go ahead and read it. As usual, we'll read it probably 2 times through. If you would start at Matthew 2:13, somebody read as many verses as you'd like, and we'll keep moving around the room.
After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother, the angel said. Stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. That night Joseph left for Egypt with the child and Mary, his mother, and they stayed there until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet. I called my son out of Egypt. Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. He sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. Herod's brutal actions fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A cry was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are dead.
Thank you. 19.
After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. And he said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went back to the land of Israel.
But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judah in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee, and came and lived in a city called Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene.
Thank you. Let's do it one more time. Matthew 2:13-23.
After they were gone, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son.
Okay, Matthew 2:16.
Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, and he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were under 2 years, who were 2 years and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. Voices heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more.
But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel.
But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene.
All right. We've got a little bit of thickness in here that I don't believe jumps off the page right away to us. So we're going to walk through a couple of these, because Matthew is the one that he's writing to Jews, so he's going to tie to prophecy often. And we have a tendency many times not to read a whole lot of the Old Testament and to look out for what are those ties that are going on here. So we'll touch on some of those. Now, right away we see the protection of Jesus Christ. Keep in mind God the Father's involvement. Where do we first see the Father get involved here? Anybody remember?
The angel talked to them and told them to leave.
Not yet. Angel told him to leave. Yeah, before that. Angel talked to Mary before that. Actually, after that, but we don't get Mary's story in Matthew. The angel goes to Mary and lets her know. But in Matthew, where's the first time we see? Yeah, there's a dream Joseph has. Okay, and the dream comes, the angel of the Lord says, Mary, Mary. Then we get a second occurrence. The wise men show up, and they're looking for the star. They head out towards Bethlehem, and the star shows back up in the sky and actually leads them right to the house where Jesus is. The wise men then have a dream that says, hey, it's time for you to take a different route. Don't go back to Herod. So God the Father is involved all the way through this. Well, we start here, and as Michael mentioned, in 2:13, Joseph again has another dream. It's the second of 4 dreams that he's going to have. And the dream comes and God says, you need to go to Egypt because there's going to be a plot to kill Jesus. Later on, we're going to read of dream number 4, his third. It's time to return to Egypt. And when he returns back to Israel, he's going to hear about Archelaus. When Herod the Great dies, his 3 sons are going to rule in his place. One is Philip, the tetrarch. Tetrarch means he rules over a fourth of the region. The other one is Archelaus. Archelaus is mean. He's the one that's down south. He's actually so mean that the Roman government is going to depose him about 680. So he's not going to be there very long. But he's kind of like his father. And we'll find out a little bit about Herod in a bit. So he says, move north, and I want you to go where his brother is. And his brother we'll find out about later, Herod Antipas. This is the Herod that is ruling when Jesus becomes older. Herod Antipas, he seems to be a pretty good ruler. He's an ethnarch. It's a different title. He's not king like King Herod. He's a little less. But they'll move up there. So 5 dreams in the star. God is involved in this whole thing. Now, we had already learned, and Christy makes a good allusion, that when the angel comes to Joseph, he says, the child that Mary has, it's from God. All the way through this, we want to see that God is involved with the plan of sending the Son, and we're going to find that the Spirit shows up at the end of Matthew chapter 3 as well. Why was protection needed? Why are we talking about the protection of Jesus Christ?
Herod wanted to kill him.
Herod wanted to kill him. Okay? I want to do a little word study here. Look at chapter 1:13 and B in the second half. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. 4. Say it again.
Matthew 1:13?
2.
I was wondering because I was reading something totally different.
2. Thank you. That's where you get good quick updates, see? All right? 2:13. All right? Remain there until I tell you why. What's the reason? For what?
Herod will seek to kill him.
Okay? Every now and then I want to just do this and jump out. This word for in the Greek is gar. It's going to lay down a foundation. Sometimes you're teaching your kids how to read and you're helping somebody. I want you, every time you see the word for, say, what is for there for? Okay? It's setting up context. Now, some of it seems real simple, and sometimes we go, well, what's going on? For, Herod is about to search for the child. Why will Herod search for the child? What do you know about so far?
It's another king.
Okay? And what does he want to do? Okay? His testimony, remember, Herod said he wanted to go and worship him. Wise men come back. I want to worship him. We're going to get the true side here, though. Herod wanted to destroy him. That's his true purpose. Why does Herod want to wipe out this child?
He's a threat.
Why is he a threat? Go ahead. What did you say, Jay?
Jesus feels like he threatened his position as a leader.
Good. What else?
Well, he's being called the king.
Good.
Now he's being called the king, so he can usurp him.
Good. Rich?
Herod's not even Jewish, so he's extra sensitive about not supposed to be in the
Correct. All right? Herod's thrown off here. This one's born king. Wait a second, I'm not king. If anybody finds out about this one, I'm going to be out of a job. So Joseph has to respond here again. Angel comes to Joseph. And what did Joseph do last time when he got a dream? Go ahead and marry Mary. What did he do? He married Mary right away. He takes care of her. We find at the end of Matthew 1 it says that he didn't sleep with her, he didn't know her. And so when we get to the Luke story and he takes her and all the pictures we see, Joseph is taking care of Mary as his wife under instruction by God that you're supposed to love her and care for her. So look at his response. Joseph, what did he do? Tell me, what did he do? Verse 14. He rose. He took the child by night and his mother. Sometimes we miss this. He departed to Egypt. And he remained there until Herod was dead. What did the angel tell him to do? I want you to look back at verse 13. These are simple things. I get it. Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. Okay? Give you a map of sorts. Remember Israel, you've got the Mediterranean Sea. Easy way to remember, Sea of Galilee leads down to the Jordan River, which dead ends into the Dead Sea. Right around the corner there at the top of the Dead Sea is where you get Jerusalem, and a little south of that is Bethlehem. So they're still down around the region of Bethlehem when they hear this, and they're going to journey to Egypt. They're going to be in Egypt for a while, and then they'll eventually come right back up, and they're going to come to Galilee into this little town of Nazareth, which we'll talk about. Anybody know why it's important? This was kind of cool. We actually had a chance in 2013 to go to Israel and to hear people talk about the importance of why Jesus was set up in Nazareth and in Galilee. If you were trying to get the word out nowadays, if you were starting a business and you wanted to get the word out, where would you spend probably most of your time and emphasis if you wanted the broadest reach? On the website, right? You would find the internet. This is the internet of their time, okay? The Via Maris, the way of the sea, is going to cut right through here. Everybody has to pass through Galilee, through Nazareth, okay? So Jesus is going to set up there, and all of a sudden we get to more prophecies being fulfilled. Now, what prophecies have we heard so far?
You mean out of today's stuff?
Nope, just so far in Matthew. Up to this point, what prophecies have we heard Matthew referred to?
Virgin birth and lineage.
Virgin birth, good, okay.
Lineage.
His lineage, good. Born in Bethlehem, good. So Matthew's continuing doing something here. In 1:15, he says, they remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken of by the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. Somebody read Hosea 11:1, please. 2:15. Somebody go ahead and read Hosea 11:1, please. And we'll make quick updates because I'm pretty sure I'm going to follow 1 all the way through.
When Israel was a child, then I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt.
Okay? Where did Israel come from when God rescued them? Okay? So why do you think it's important here that Matthew's referring to Jesus? Here. Out of Egypt I called my son. Matthew's speaking to Jews. Jews recognized that the Israelites came out of Egypt into the wilderness, and then God brought them into the land. God was building for himself a people there. That story is fixed within the mind of the Jews. Matthew is connecting Jesus is an Israelite. Jesus is also representative of the nation. So I'm going to take him down and I'm going to say that, hey, Jesus is fulfilling prophecy here. He's the one you're looking for. Remember, he's already said he's Messiah. He's connected to David. He's connected to Abraham. Over and over again, he's going to tie him. Just as Israel was brought out of Egypt, so Jesus would be taken to Egypt for protection and brought out of Egypt. Why did Israel go into Egypt? Do you remember? Famine. God was protecting them from what was going on. The other thing that was happening, anybody know how long was Israel in Egypt for? 400 years. Meanwhile, what else is going on in Canaan? Anybody remember? When they leave Egypt, they're going to go into the land of Canaan, and what are they going to do? Well, they're supposed to. They're supposed to go into Canaan, and they're supposed to wipe out Canaan. Why? God had said earlier that the sin of the Canaanites, it hadn't arisen enough. It's over the 400 years that Canaan goes wild. They start doing child sacrifices. They turn their back on God. Remember, the whole world is to honor God. It's not just the Jewish people. The Jewish people are given the law, and they're given everything that God would tie, the promises, the hope, so that they can spread it with the world and be a blessing to the nations. But God is protecting Israel within Egypt so that they don't get caught up in the mess that's going on in Canaan. That's why when they get to Canaan and they don't do what God told them to do, they start making covenants, they start intermarrying, they start doing all of these things. God says, you missed it. I was protecting you. Okay? Jesus is sent down to Egypt as protection. Now, if you think about it, Egypt's not a real happy place in most cases with Israel. They're a hostile nation. So for Joseph to hear, take Jesus to Egypt, it's got to be a word from God. You mean you want me to take this one that you've said is the Savior of our people? You want me to take him to Egypt? But Joseph obeys. Just as Israel was God's son, so Jesus is God's son. Exodus 4:22, it said, Israel, you are my firstborn son. Joseph is, Matthew's tying again. We keep going. In 2:17 to 18, we read that Herod, when he was tricked, in verse 16, he became furious. He sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem, in that region, 2 years and younger, according to the time he ascertained from the wise men. And we get this prophecy again. Then Matthew says was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. Let's turn to Jeremiah 31, if you don't mind. Anybody know what's happening in Jeremiah 31? Jeremiah 31 is one of the major chapters in the Old Testament for the Jewish people. Okay? If Exodus 12 and 15 were the high points for the Abrahamic covenant, and 2 Kings 8 is the high point, 2 Samuel is a high point when we get to David and the Davidic covenant, here's our important part for the new covenant of God doing something. So Jeremiah 31, somebody read verse 15, please.
Thus said the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, with a weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children, because they were not.
Okay? I'm trying to set some context here of what Matthew's doing. Jeremiah is writing during the time, he's the prophet, he's a weeping prophet, he's crying out to Jerusalem, saying, turn to God. It's in Jeremiah's time that Nebuchadnezzar's going to come in and he's going to destroy Jerusalem and carry them all the way to Babylon. It's in this process that many of the Jewish boys are killed. Many of them are turned into slaves. We know of 4 of them: Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay? Rachel is buried on the way to Bethlehem. Ramah's the town just north of that. And so as a result, Rachel is always seen as the mother of Judah and Jerusalem and Israel. She's a good tie. So Jeremiah in his prophecy says, with all the killing that's going on here, Rachel's crying. But look at verse 16, if you're in Jeremiah 31. Thus says the Lord, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, declares the Lord. And they shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is hope for your future, declares the Lord, and your children shall come back to their own country. Go all the way down to verse 31. Jeremiah writes, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. There is a major thing happening here. God's making a new covenant, speaking about, as bad as it seems that we're locked away, Israel has been deported into Babylon. Don't cry. God's got something better in store. So Rachel's weeping for Israel's destruction by Nebuchadnezzar becomes compared to the slaughter of the boys in Bethlehem by Herod. Rachel's tomb was near Bethlehem, and Rachel was considered by many the mother. We talked about that. We look at the new covenant. Well, why does he do this? Matthew makes a point almost bringing to an end. What happened in Babylon is about to be turned. We've got one more event of Rachel crying because the children have died. But guess what? The next verse said, turn your weeping into joy. Don't cry anymore. Because the new covenant is here. We don't pick up on this readily, I get this, because we're not looking in the Old Testament saying, where's our Messiah? For most of us, we didn't grow up steeped in the Old Testament, longing and in tradition. So Matthew's doing something with what he's saying here. We'll read this sometimes and just jump right over it. Well, why is this important? Well, we know that. I'm going to ask you a question. Herod takes action. He sent and he killed. He wants to kill all the male children in Bethlehem, all that region, who were 2 years old and under. But what does his plot sound like? Where are you familiar with this?
Moses.
Pharaoh, Moses. What happened back then?
Same thing. Killed all the boys.
Killed all the boys. You remember why? In Exodus 1, you can go there now, or I'll give you the notes
They were
later on.
becoming too many.
The children of the Hebrews were growing too many. So his big plan was, what do I do? If you get rid of the boys, they're probably going to be the strength. They're going to fight us. So he tells the midwives, you need to kill the baby boys. What do the midwives do? What do the midwives do? Do you remember this? No. Everybody turn to Exodus chapter 1.
Doesn't it say that the Israelite women deliver too quickly and they can't do anything about it? They're there and alive and
Yeah?
thriving and too late.
So let's go there. Exodus chapter 1. Somebody want to read for us 15 to 21, please? Exodus 1, 15 to 21.
Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch what they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let it live. But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives. Why have you done this, he demanded? Why have you allowed the boys to live? The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, the midwives replied. They are more vigorous and have their babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time. So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply and live more powerfully. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own.
Okay. Pharaoh orders the midwives to kill the Hebrew boys. Why don't they? How many times does it say they feared God? Look at it. Take your time. Twice. Where does it tell you in relation to their story?
After they were told to kill the boys.
Okay? And then where again? Okay? They're bookends. They fear God, so they won't do it. They give Pharaoh a response, hey, those Hebrew ladies have their babies even before we get there. And they fear God, so God gave them families. Don't miss, who are these Egyptian midwives? They're Israelites, right? Yes? No?
Yes.
The Egyptian midwives, they are the Egyptian midwives. The Egyptian midwives. Where are they from? Egypt. Therefore they are
Egyptian.
thus making them Gentiles. Don't miss, God's plan is not thwarted by Gentiles. Over and over again, God is using people to rescue his people. Matthew makes a tie and a claim that he's connecting. What was happening to Israel is also what happens to Jesus. Okay? In the same way that Herod wants to wipe out the boys, but God protects Jesus, Pharaoh orders the midwives, but they fear God. Because when you read Exodus, you're going to find God say to Moses, what? Pharaoh will know who I am. That's why when Moses walks in and says, let my people go, who is this God? I don't know about this God. The Egyptian midwives feared God. All through Scripture, we're finding people that go, wait a second, we know who God is. So Pharaoh's going to try and update his plan. Exodus 1:22. Someone read that.
So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive.
Okay? He expands it. The midwives aren't doing the work, so let's do it for all the people. Okay? That's why we get some people every now and then that say that our God is a grotesque God because he would kill the firstborn of Egypt when you get there. God has a way of bringing retribution and judgment in his own time at his own way. Pharaoh's trying to wipe out children. Herod's doing the same thing. Herod knows there's a king. Now, when you watched all of the Moses movies, whether the animated versions or the other ones, normally we hear Pharaoh wants to get rid of the deliverer. We don't get that really from the Exodus passage. We just get, he doesn't like these Hebrew people, and he's concerned that if they keep growing big. But God is going to rescue one special Israelite. Who? Moses. And God is going to use Moses as a deliverer. Now, I don't have time here today, and I would love for us to do a study of the book of John. Because one of John's arguments is that Jesus is the greater Moses. When Moses is giving his final speech at the end of Deuteronomy, he says, there is coming a prophet that is greater than I. And so he's going to walk through and tell them, look for this one. Israel should have known. Moses fed them with bread and manna in the wilderness. Jesus feeds the 5,000. Moses comes to the Red Sea, holds out a staff, and the water splits, and he walks between it. Jesus walks on water. Over and over again, the gospel writers are going to say, we need to pick up what is true about Jesus as it relates to the story of the Old Testament, because it's always been about him. All of the Old Testament is looking to the arrival of Jesus. The New Testament begins with the celebration of his arrival, and it finishes with us looking for his second coming. Okay? So when we see Herod do this, we recognize this is an old pattern by Satan. All the way along, Satan is going to try and wipe out God's plan, whichever way he can. And when we get into Genesis, we're going to see that over and over and over again. Any question here?
How do you talk about the midwives? How can you read this and tell that they are Egyptian? Starting at 15, it says the Hebrew midwives, and then when you help the Hebrew women.
Let me go back and look at that, Paul. I think the midwives were serving the Egyptians, the Hebrews. So they were the midwives that worked with the Hebrews. There were only 2 of them. There weren't 2 midwives within all of Egypt. So Pharaoh's workers for Hebrews. I don't know if they are, let me go back and look at that.
I was just curious, like if
Nope.
the two ladies you're talking about,
Shiphrah and Puah.
yeah, maybe you can study them and find out the language. I was just wondering where you got it from the text.
I will. Yeah, I think those were the Egyptian midwives who would serve Pharaoh for the Hebrew ladies. Okay? But good. All right? Why kill the boys in Moses' time? We talk about why kill the boys in Jesus' time. Why? Why kill the boys in Jesus' time again?
Make sure you get them.
Okay? Some people struggle and they say there's no extra biblical reference here. We don't have any history. Josephus didn't write about this. Why? Bethlehem wasn't a really big town. Okay? There are numbers that people suggest that there was maybe only 10 to 15 boys that were killed. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the destruction. Matthew's doing something here. Herod doesn't want a king. The Israelites that should have been looking for a king, they're thrown off. They're not looking for him. What are the Israelites going to do that should have been looking for Jesus within Matthew and the Gospels? You know this. The scribes and the Pharisees, what are they going to do with regards to Jesus?
Crucify.
Okay, they're going to want to kill him. They're going to reject him. They're going to seek to plot against him. And so very early on, he's showing a picture. You think this King Herod, he was wicked and evil? You guys did the same thing. Okay? More prophecies are fulfilled when we get to chapter 2, verse 23. Go back into Matthew, if you would, please. At 19, we read, Herod died. Behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Remember, this is the third dream for Joseph. Fourth dream overall. He says, rise, take the child and his mother, go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father, he was afraid to go there. Being warned of a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he was called a Nazarene. It's the only place that Matthew does this. We've heard him say Isaiah. We've heard him make reference to Jeremiah. He actually says here what was spoken by the prophets. Now this throws a lot of people off, because there is no prophecy anywhere that says Jesus will be called a Nazarene. There is no quote at all. So we need to look at what are the options. Well, Mary was in Nazareth when she got the news that she would be having Jesus. Nazareth was their hometown, according to Luke 2:39. When everything was done that we read about in Matthew, they returned to their hometown. But what are the options for understanding why this is a prophecy? Option 1, the word Netzer in the Hebrew is often tied back to Isaiah 11:1. Someone read Isaiah 11:1, please.
Then a shoot will grow from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit.
All right? Isaiah is writing in a similar time. He and Jeremiah are contemporaries. And Isaiah said there's going to be a branch, a shoot that's going to come up. If Israel was a tree, when Nebuchadnezzar takes them, they're hacked down. But he says, while you think that the stump is dead, there's a little life, and out of it is going to come up a shoot. Okay? The word there for branch is netzer. Some people will pull that and they'll go netzer, Nazarene. Those are close in the Hebrew roots. Maybe that's it. Option 2 is that Nazareth actually housed the Roman garrison. So anybody that lived there, they knew that the Romans lived there, and it became almost a term of contempt. If you were from Nazareth, nothing could be good there. You remember, John 1:46 is the quote from Nathanael, when his brother comes and says, hey, we found Messiah. He's from Nazareth. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? So to say he was a Nazarene spoke of the fact that people didn't really view Nazareth as a great place. In the same way, there's a lot of contempt with regards to who this Jesus is. And they're going to wrestle and they're going to fight. We'll read one more passage on that. Option 3, maybe Nazarite. You know, that's close. And Jesus was more devoted to God than a Nazarite. I'll tell you of the options. I'm going to go with 2. More that Nazareth was just a contemptible place. And so Matthew is saying everything that was said about Messiah is true, that he wouldn't be accepted. We're going to read a passage in a moment from Isaiah, and we'll look and we'll find that that's the testimony of really Isaiah about Messiah that the people had forgotten they weren't looking for. This one's very weak because Jesus wasn't a Nazarite. He never took a Nazarite vow. We don't read of him not cutting his hair or any of that. That's a weak description. This one, maybe. There's a whole lot of discussion with regards to that. So why does Matthew include Jesus' protection here? Isaiah 7:14 has told us already he's the promised child of the virgin. We heard that. Isaiah 9:6 told us he is the child born and he is the son given. Over Christmas break, we stopped and watched Dr. Tony Evans preach on a Christmas series. We did the first one. And he talked about Isaiah 9:6 and the importance of this. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. That there's a statement of Jesus' humanity and his divinity. He's born a child, but the son was actually given. The son wasn't born and the child given. There's a statement being said there. Micah 5:2 we've already read in Matthew's context that he is the Christ, Messiah, born in Bethlehem. 11:1, maybe we have this reference to he is the shoot from Jesse. He is the branch. But I want us to spend a little bit of time here now in Isaiah 52. If everybody turn there, Isaiah 52, you know Isaiah 53, but sometimes chapter divisions mess us up. And there are 4 servant songs within the book of Isaiah that they're written about this servant that follows God. And this last one is known as the suffering servant. Okay? Isaiah 52:13, and we're going to read all of 53:12. So somebody start at 13 if you don't mind, and let's read through it.
See, my servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up highly, exalted.
Just as many were appalled at you, his appearance was so disfigured that he did not look like a man, and his form did not resemble a human being.
So shall he sprinkle many nations, the kings shall shut their mouths at him, for that which had not been told them shall they see, and that which they had not heard shall they consider.
53:1. We're going to go through the end of 53.
Whereas the knees shall report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and a root out of a dry ground. He has no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not.
Yet it was our weakness he carried, it was our faults that made him healed. For we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sin. But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sin. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. All of us like sheep have strayed away. We have left God's path to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of all us all.
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb. So he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth.
Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities.
Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
All right? This is the suffering servant we read about. Who does this describe for us? Okay, this is Jesus. We read this and we see Jesus all the way through. Matthew is tying all of what the prophecy has said to this Jesus, who is the Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. He said Jesus Christ is the suffering servant. Why is this important that they get disconnected? We talked about this a little bit before. What were the Jewish people looking for in Messiah?
King,
What was King supposed to do?
come on a white horse, take over.
Yeah. What did Jesus do? He came in on a donkey and they praised him. Hosanna in the highest. Our King is here. And then he suffered. He didn't say a word when he stood before trial. And then he died with common criminals. Matthew, that's who you want us to serve? Remember, Matthew's writing not just to lost Jews, he's dealing with all Jews. So there's some that are saved that go, wait a second, is our faith in vain? No, this is the suffering servant that you read about. This is the one that God is protecting so that he can suffer. Because some might think, so God protected one that would die? That seems very pointless. Wait a second, we remember God protected the Hebrew boys back in Egypt. And we remember him protecting one boy that would become the deliverer of the nation. Why does Matthew include Jesus' protection? Because Jesus is the expected Messiah, who we are to worship. Tom Constable, if you ever want some great study notes to read, you can go to soniclight.com. Soniclight.com. Tom Constable does a commentary that actually does a summary of commentaries online, and you can get it. It's free, great tool. He says, these three things form the basis of Matthew's gospel. Jesus is presented as the Messiah prophesied and promised in the Old Testament. The Jews reject him, and because of this rejection, the king turns to the Gentiles, and the kingdom program for the Jews is postponed. Now, we're not going to go through all of Matthew, okay? There's going to come a point that Jesus is going to tell the disciples, go only to the house of Israel and share with them the news of the kingdom. We get to Matthew 28, and we hear, go you into all the world. When Christ comes, he goes to the Jew first. But he came unto his own, and his own rejected him. You'll find Paul's ministry is the same. Wherever he goes to the synagogue first, and then he goes to the Gentiles. That's the story of Acts, is that Jesus ascends, the ministry is given to now the disciples, they go out, and when they don't go out and they get very insular, then persecution comes and it scatters them. And then this man that would scatter them and persecute them, Paul, he gets miraculously saved, comes face to face with Jesus, and he's now going to take the message to Jewish synagogue to Gentiles, to Jewish synagogue to Gentiles, until he ends up in Rome at the end of Acts. And the Jews come to him and say, we've heard about you and we don't know that we believe you. And he says, let me tell you about Jesus. And they say, we reject your word. And he says, let the gospel be spread to the Gentiles. And the amazing part, as I've told you before, when you get to Romans and Paul's saying, does God throw away Israel? By no means. God has taken what should have been Israel, taking the good news to the nations, and he's flipped it so that the Gentiles and the nations are now taking the good news out, but to Israel as well. So that the Jews should look and say, wait a second, though we rejected him, he is our promised king. So my question always is, so what? Okay, today's a little thicker. I told Nikki, I said, there are moments that I know we get a little bit more interaction, but we could read over this and I could tell you, be like Joseph and be obedient immediately, completely, and happily, and let's be like Joseph, because he listened to the angel and he took the family. Don't be like Herod, because Herod wanted to wipe out God in his life. That's not what you should be. And I think we get a lot of that teaching every now and then. That is, here's one person, be like him. I want to dig a little deeper. Matthew's doing something. And so he lays all of this prophecy to make an argument. So what? In 2016, can I challenge you and me? Don't get over Jesus Christ. Some days we're very quick to go, okay, got Jesus. God, what's in there for me? God gave him to us. Emmanuel is with us. God protected him for us. And then God gave him for us. So I want to challenge you. Two things. Make a personal choice to pursue Jesus Christ. In the same way that God protected Jesus, I want to challenge you. Protect your time in the Bible as you learn about him. Protect your time as you read books about Jesus. Some will read the Bible, some will read books, some will read the Bible in books. I'm reading right now Ecclesiastes. I think we'll look at Ecclesiastes somewhere before the end of the year. But what do? I just spend some time just reading, maybe a chapter, some days 2 chapters. And then after I've read it a couple of times, then I grab a commentary. Maybe Sonic Light, one I mentioned, or there are other tools out there. And I just start saying, what's happening here? And then I've got another book that I saw that I thought, well, let me read about the Trinity. So I'm reading that at some point. But some of us are better than others. I know this for me, that you get busy. And if you get up and things start going, it's very quick and easy that you lose that time. Let me tell you, the world system has never changed. It wants to wipe out Jesus wherever it can. And so you can take a quiet moment, and if you take your phone with you or you're going to read on your phone, it's amazing how many texts or calls or things come in. Protect your time with Jesus this year. Watch over it and say, God, if you protected Jesus, you did it for me, for a purpose and a reason. When you go to read to learn about him. Read to learn about the story of what God's doing. You'll get stuff out of it. I'm confident that if we'll walk through the scriptures, as we hear something, we begin to align our lives to what God's teaching is, and little by little, we're changed. Our minds are renewed, and we begin to think like God and act like God, because the Word of God is hitting us right where we need to be, because we're walking through it. Too often we're looking going, I didn't get anything out of this today. What's in this for me? This doesn't seem like there's anything. We read kind of selfishly. I want to challenge us that when we're reading, let's make it about him. God, what do I need to understand about you? What do I need to understand about Jesus? What is there when I read the Old Testament that says, hey, I got to be looking for something you were saying? What is there when I read the New Testament that I say, what's going on? Because guess what? Our greatest joy is that there's coming a day when we will see Jesus as he is, and we will worship him. You know, the songwriter, I Can Only Imagine, what we'll do? We try and think about that. And every now and then, kids ask the question, and maybe you and I wrestle with that from time to time. What are we going to do in heaven? Well, are we just going to just stand there and look at Jesus and worship him? Is that all? And we really think like that some moments and go, is that all? This Jesus that would leave heaven and come to earth as a baby, fully man, fully God, give his life for us, we now get a chance to serve him and to honor him. And you go, but we're at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions. How does this scratch my itch where I'm at right now? Pursue Jesus. He's worth it. Pursue him on your job. Pursue him in your marriage. Pursue him with your kids. Pursue him in your singleness. Pursue him wherever you are. But let's not just make a personal choice. I wanted another P. Let's make a pool choice as a class. Together. Let's protect one another from failing to pursue Jesus Christ. I've been here for a couple of months back. We got some challenges with us some days. And the question is, are we going to step up and really encourage one another? Hey, are you pursuing Jesus? I said this. We've got a from my first time teaching, we've got a world that's longing to see Christians step up in their faith. Can I tell you, we've got Christians that are waiting for Christians to step up and to say, don't do that. Don't make that choice. You're going to blow it. And this isn't worth it. Hey, let's pursue Jesus together. None of us are perfect. None of us are better than the other. All of us walk with a limp, and we've got to struggle somewhere. But together, let's encourage each other. Next week, we're going to start on a new series called Beginnings. We'll do Genesis. I want to ask you to read Genesis 1. We're going to be in Genesis probably for about 13 weeks. We'll do Genesis 1 to 11. Next week, we're only doing Genesis 1:1. But I want you to read the book of Genesis. Okay? Next week, if you've got friends or you've got family members that you know that are away from Christ, or they're not saved, or they struggle with even believing in God, we're going to talk about the atheist, the agnostic, the deist, and the theist. And all that I've been doing when I talk about what is Matthew doing with what he's saying, and we've looked at this, I want you to read Genesis and begin to ask afresh, what is Moses doing with what he's saying? We believe Moses wrote the book. Who did Moses write to? When did Moses write? And why is he writing what he's writing? That's going to affect greatly how we read the text, and it always should. Who was the original author? Who was the original audience? And what were they hearing? And what do we need to hear? Because God's word is timeless. All right?
You just said Moses wrote Genesis, right?
Yep. Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
I had a conversation. We went camping with the scouts, and Michael, Michael knows him, and I just met him this weekend. He's a Jew, and I mean, we didn't get into deep stuff, but I said something about Genesis, Moses. Moses didn't write Genesis. I'm like, what? He never really could tell me who did, you know, but I thought he did. I thought he wrote the first 5. You know? It's the kind of thing for a living out in the woods, camping.
We'll touch that. A lot of Jews don't believe that the Exodus is a real story. It's hard what's happened. In many cases, they were greatly offended, especially at the Holocaust. That if God was going to do this, many Jews view Israel as a suffering servant. So Matthew's argument is telling them it's not about the nation, it's about one that came. All right? Anything else? Guys, pray for Jamie and his family. He lost his grandma 2 days ago, and they've got the viewing today and then the funeral tomorrow. Very close, and it's been a tough time for their family. All right? So, David, do you mind closing this out in prayer, please, sir?
God, thank you for this time of teaching that we've had. Thank you for all the things that you tell us in your word, all the stories that take meaning to me, for example, and fill in the pray that you be with us. I pray that you would be with us this week as we read this over. Help us to go out. I pray that you be with us now as we go into the service and hear more teaching. Just all the time, every day, every moment, be with us. Infuse yourself into us.
Amen. Thank you all.